Hi, sorry I'm late. When I clicked accepting the invite, it sent it to it disappeared, so I lost the link. I forgot it was there.
Oh, okay, no problem. No problem at all, mate.
Mhm.
Are you wearing a chess tie?
I am.
That's
I wasn't
awesome.
sure, but I thought it was, fitting for the occasion.
Absolutely. I feel terribly underdressed, actually. I'm actually trying to flog a few t-shirts. We've just had these retro London
Hmm.
Chessboxing t-shirts printed.
I saw
Um,
them on the chat. There's one with the Berserker as well.
yeah, we've got a
The chess
hoodie.
merch.
Yeah,
Hmm.
with like one of those classic Berserker kind of thousand yard stairs on the back. But yeah.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
no doubt, yeah, I'll be trying to shoehorn a plug for our merchandise in the entire episode. But
Cool.
how have you been?
Uh, Really, really busy. I haven't actually been able to get to chess boxing since the fight, which I've been a bit disappointed about. I got a bit behind on work and I've been playing catch up ever since.
Yeah,
And I'm having a great time, but just every weekend I'm picking up something that I've missed.
I guess it just kind of consumes your whole life, doesn't it? It's so
Yeah.
time consuming training,
Mm.
and you're not just training for one element, are you? You're training for both. Um,
Yeah. And then there's a
what-
psychological element as well.
yeah,
It's one thing to do the physical training, you can get that very well, but you've got to make sure not just that you can hold your own physically, but that you can keep it together mentally. And so it's trying to stay calm as well was a whole part of it.
yeah. Especially those few hours up to the actual fight on the day. It's I find
Mm.
it very difficult to stay calm, and you realise that you're using up so much nervous energy that you really should be trying to keep for the
Mm.
actual bout. You also had to lose quite a lot of weight, I think, didn't you? How did you find that?
Oh no, it was the opposite. I was having to gain weight to meet Ollie. Actually, that was my least favorite part of the whole thing. I Food is something that I eat when I have to. I'm absolutely not a foodie. No interest in things with more than one flavor at a time. Far too complicated for me. So forcing myself to eat enough to gain weight, and then it just didn't stick on. This is going to be really annoying to a lot of people, I'm sure, but it just melts right off me. So if I miss a single day, I was falling behind. That was quite challenging, and I was nervous right up until the weigh-in that I wouldn't make it, but then I did, and that was great. But yeah, I've eaten way more tuna than anyone ever should ever do. No, wouldn't recommend it. I'm sick of
Yeah,
fish.
you've got one of those body types, haven't you? That like Matt
Hmm.
Reed's the same. Like whatever he eats, he just doesn't put any weight on. But
Yeah,
don't worry, once you get to 40, it all changes. You
I'm
won't have
sure
any
it will.
problems then. Yeah. So what do you do outside of chess boxing?
So I used to be a university lecturer, and I've just this year stopped teaching to start learning again. I'm doing a conversion course to get a law degree, 3 years of law crammed into 1 year, which is super intense, but it's a great time. I'm learning all kinds of legal aspects to protection from cricket balls, among other things. It's
All
weird
right.
week by week, but it's
What do you
it's
mean,
fun.
as
I
in
have a
legal
faith.
protection or like wearing a cricket box?
No, as in there was a case where a ball was hit out of a village cricket ground, went over the road and landed and hit someone gardening. And
Oh
then the
no.
question was, were the cricket people negligent for not having put a higher fence to stop the ball landing? The
Mm.
fun part was they're cricketers, so they're super nerdy, and they could go back in their statistics to I think it was 1970 something, and the case was in the late 1990s.
Mm.
They could say actually the ball had only been hit out of the ground 4 times in those 20 years. So obviously there was no need to put an incentive, and there was no incentive to put a fence. It would have been an irresponsible use of money. So yeah,
Wow.
weird things like that. But I'm having a great time. It's colossal amount of work.
Yeah, I imagine there's a big crossover, the Venn diagram, cricketers and chess players.
Oh, huge number, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I love going to the cricket, but I wouldn't sit there with a scorecard and do that all day. But I know that's some people's dream, isn't it?
It's like baseball. Some people are really into the maths of the game, and that's not really what sport is about. I think the whole point is getting in there and doing your own part.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about you sort of outside of chess boxing. So talk us through your persona. I did actually get a chance to rewatch your bout and your intro, which is quite unusual. I think I still got parts of your scythe stored somewhere in my garage.
Yeah.
So what was the thinking
Um,
behind that?
so I have made some questionable decisions in my life. One of which was when I was quite a bit younger, going down to Camden on a whim and buying myself a cape. Um,
That sounds like a
you
great
would
decision. That sounds like a great life
well,
choice.
You would think so, but the opportunities to actually wear a cape were really surprisingly low. And this wasn't, this was a fancy cape. It wasn't my day-to-day cape. That's fine. That does
Yeah,
all the rounds. But
okay.
a fancy cape, I didn't have enough opportunities to use it. It gets like once a year for Halloween, and so I forget who I was talking with. It might have been you, but someone came up with Jack the Reaper Sheard, and suddenly the whole image in my head of the cape and the scythe and the Black Sabbath music all fit together wonderfully. And I thought it was a good pun, so I was excited for that.
Yeah, I think if you don't have a cape in your life, there's something wrong, really. And there's no better place to wear a cape than a chess boxing event. Whether you're completely,
I can conceive of nothing better.
Yeah. Also, I don't know if you listened back to the commentary, but they mentioned your fantastic moustache like constantly as well. I
think we all pugilist with you.
Yeah, that's. I think we all appreciated your get up and making an effort with your intro, and also something else I noticed just looking at your stats as they came up as well. Like you were so well matched in terms of your stats, and I appreciate that you had to lose a bit of weight, and you looked in a fantastic shape. You looked absolutely ripped.
Thank you.
But you were so well matched, even on the chess as well. So how did the chess go? Because I noticed you opened with a knight at f3, which is quite an unusual opening, certainly in chess boxing. What was the thinking behind that?
So my thinking was I wanted something that I could get through the first few moves and get a position I was comfortable with. And my usual thing for long play is the reti or the English. And when I go into more adventurous stuff, there's always the possibility that someone has a tactic prepared. They know a bishop f7 sacrifice, and suddenly your whole position's in ruins, and you don't want to be calculating tactics after you've been punched in the head. It's just a terrible idea. Whereas the reti, I thought it's positional things that I'm really familiar with. It will keep the game within my control, and I know that I'm only really looking for tactics on b7 and c6. If you can remove the other 58 squares of the board, chess suddenly becomes a lot easier. Was the idea.
And did that manifest? Did it play out as you'd hoped?
I think the opening was actually a great success. I got a position I was really comfortable with. I knew that he'd made some slight errors and I could be a bit in control of the position. And then when I saw the tactic on the long diagonal, it was great. It all came together. And I felt confident. Then it was just about holding it and not letting that slip. And I almost did towards the end. I blundered a whole piece. That was disappointing. But fortunately, I managed to get enough gain in the ending that I could still salvage a win, even after giving up a piece, which was nice.
We'll get onto that in a minute, but I just want to talk to you about because the first boxing round is always an interesting one, and particularly for me I have lots of roles, but one of the most important one is matching people. And obviously, I'd seen you two spar before. I was very familiar with both of you, having trained in the same gym as you. But it's always that first, 10, 20 seconds when you think, have I done the right thing? And I thought actually you were well matched, although your boxing was much more aggressive than Ollie, and I think he was slightly rocked by that. Was that a tactic? Is this intentional?
I felt he was a bit nervous, and I thought there's a good opportunity to make the most of that. I felt, as I said, I was comfortable in the chess. If I can also try and get some sort of edge in the boxing, make him go on the back foot a bit, that would be really, really good. My plan had always been to be able to hold the center. I'd watched him box, and he likes to hop around the outside. He can use up as much energy as he likes doing that. So if I just sort of made him feel from the very beginning he had to be on the outside of the ring, it would be a lot easier for me to hold. Plus, if you can just put a bit of fear into your opponent from the very beginning, that's really good. It gives you a psychological edge. The problem came when I fell over, tripping up over my own shoes, which slightly undermined any psychological edge I may have gained in those first few minutes. But
I think it was very clear that it was a slip, though. I don't think there's no question of it, really.
But it wasn't quite the start I was looking for to be getting up from the floor only a few seconds in.
So you've also got a high guard, which I like. Although obviously it does leave you slightly open to the body. I don't think Ollie really identified that. He didn't seem to go too much for your body. Did you think that was
I could hear his coach yelling at him to go for my body the whole way through. And it's very difficult to respond to that when you're trying to keep everything together. But I was hearing him do that, and then it was only in the very last rounds when he was going all out that he got a few good ones in there that he'd finally got that message through from his trainer. But for the most part, there was one round where he really went for my head. He came out really, really strong, like a lion, and I took some really real ringers to that. And that made me keep my guard up even higher. But fortunately, I was lucky that he didn't go for my body quite so much, because that could have been very difficult for me.
I don't know if you listened to the last podcast that came out over the weekend. Did you listen to that at all?
I didn't, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Oh, okay. That's fine. So Matt Coldwell, the Minotaur, he was saying that you reminded him of a secretary bird, like your very upright stance, like high guard. And actually, I think it was reminiscent, especially with the moustache, a bit like David Jarman. He's got a similar kind of guard when he's actually got his guard up, which is kind of like very kind of 1800s kind of like boxing sort of style. Yeah. And I thought, initially I was like, oh, well, all he needs to do is just throw a couple into your guard and then go low. But he just didn't really seem to do that as much as he could have done. No. But
it's always very easy to say these sort of things from outside the ring, but once you're in there, it's a lot more difficult to get the strategy in. But I've got a good reason to keep my guard high. When I first started doing some boxing training, the coach who was running it was at a different gym. Decided to pick on me very specifically because my guard was too low, and so he made me come out and do the sort of display things with him. And every time my guard dropped, he would clobber me on the side of the head. Yeah. And he was a very successful amateur boxer. And after you take a few of those, you learn to keep your hands up just to minimize it. So that was a very good bit of training he'd given me.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's better to have a high guard than a low guard. That's certainly true. So the first boxing round, I mean, if we were doing points, I would say that you probably won that. And then we go into the second chess round, which is quite a dramatic round, isn't it? Because there's a pawn break, a complex pawn break. Do you want to talk us through that and how you sort of came out of that?
Do you have a copy of the game to hand by any chance? I can't remember the exact tactics off my head.
I don't, not on me, but essentially, we'll have to.
I remember it was on C6. I remember it was about knight to E5 to just open up the bishop, going on to C6 and hitting the rook. And I had to separate his rooks. I managed to knock his bishop back onto the back rank at one stage, so that I could then bring rook down and hit it, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
No, so the bit I was thinking of is when you had your queens lined up against each other. Mm-hmm. He broke his pawns, opening his queen up to your queen.
With B5.
And then you were able to take with check with one of your knights, and then you ended up going a bishop up because knight E4 takes F6. Yeah,
that's the one.
Okay.
No, I do remember that. I remember it's the same thing you always have in the Catalan is you've got that horrible bishop for black on B7, and they've got to be really careful they don't leave it unprotected. Whereas I never have that problem because king on G2, king on G1 defends the bishop on G2. So you're always looking out for those tactics, and then when you see a check in the middle, you can always take that. So that was a really I was confident, obviously, after winning the piece there. I was feeling quite good about the position. But I remember having to think quite hard to make sure I hadn't missed something. Because like you say, we were really well matched. He's not a patzer by any means. He's a very good chess player. And there's always that moment of doubt where you think, I must have missed something. He couldn't be letting me get away with this.
It was the discovered attack with when you brought your knight to check. That was what did it. But in fairness to Ollie, he then got himself into another muddle, which I think is what you're referring to, where he brought down his rook onto the seventh row. Mm-hmm. He got it. Well, you actually trapped his rook just behind one of your pawns, and the commentators are like, "Oh, that's it. He's done it now. The game's away from Ollie." But then he managed to bring he brought his bishop down, didn't he, to protect his
A3 and managed to get the exchange back. That was really good. I was impressed by that. He was not giving up. Sometimes you lose a piece and you just all the fight goes out of you. Absolute opposite with him. He went a piece down and went, great, this is now mine to win. I'm going to go for it.
Well, he certainly
Really,
came
really
out in the
smart.
next boxing round as well
Oh yeah.
after that, didn't he? He wasn't holding
Hmm.
back, and that was his moment to perhaps trying to assert himself. But I thought you certainly you handled that well. And did you have many supporters in the crowd at all?
Yeah, I had a few. So my girlfriend was sitting over in one corner. I had my sister who'd also come. Her first ever boxing, and she doesn't play chess, so that was a bit of a risk for her. But she found the bar, which was quite good.
Yeah.
And
How can you
then
not
I
enjoy
had
chess boxing though, even if you don't play chess?
oh, she loved it. There were occasional moments where it got a bit much for her, and she had to look away. I had to tell her what was going on, but
Mm.
she really enjoyed it. She's probably going to come back to the next one, I think, which is surprising for her. Never shown any interest in my chess before now. But and then in addition to that, there were some people who'd come from chess in prisons, who would come. They come every year, but they come specifically because they knew I was fighting this time, which was nice.
So they also presumably know Matt Reed as well, who was fighting.
They do, yes. That was the connection. It was through chess in prisons that I found out about chess boxing a year ago,
Oh, I
and it
see.
was great.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah. So just can you explain what chess and prisons is? Because it may not be obvious to some people.
It is actually exactly what it sounds like. So when you're in prison, there is very little to do. And one game that requires no electricity and only one other person is chess, and you can spend as much time studying it as you like. So there's a charity called Chess in Schools and Communities that organizes chess clubs in prison, and so we go in once a week to Wandsworth Prison is the one I work at, but we're also in several others around the country, and we just organise chess lessons for a constant mix of people. You get all kinds of people in prison, and it's never the ones you think who'd show an interest in chess. You get a really good mix of people. For a while, I was working at the Young Offenders Institution called, unfortunately, ISIS, but they decided to stick with that name.
Mm.
And that was when I was leading a team in the International Prison Chess Competition,
Wow.
which is another thing that we do. It's a really really fulfilling use of time actually, and anyone who's interested, do look them up. We're always looking for more volunteers.
I mean, I'm a big fan of people in general, but interesting characters. I mean, that's part of the reason why I like chess boxing. But I imagine you meet some incredible people with some very interesting backstories.
Oh yeah, you get all kinds of people. A lot of them are very sad backstories. Wandsworth has a very high population of foreign nationals because it's the prison for Heathrow, so all the immigration cases go through there. But you meet all kinds of interesting people. I'd love to go into more details, but I'm not sure how much I can really say on this. But there was one particular highlight where I met someone in prison who had been so successful they had their own Netflix documentary on the very reasons they were in prison. That
Wow.
was the highlight, I think.
Okay, and presumably the guys coming to watch you were members of the warden's team. I take it.
Yeah, it was various volunteers from chess and schools and communities. I don't think the wardens were there this time, although they have come before. No, it was other volunteers.
Well, we'll definitely put a link in the show notes. And it sounds like a very very good cause, and it's something I'd quite like to do. I've said to Matt, if I'd love to go in and experience it. It sounds fascinating.
It is something you'll remember for the rest of your life, one way or another.
Yeah. So let's get back to your bout. So you're 3 points up. You've captured his bishop. He's managed to salvage his rook, so he's still 3 points down. So how did you find that third round, would it be, of boxing? Was it third round? Second round? Sorry, second round of boxing.
Second round boxing.
Yeah.
Oh, that was so obviously I was feeling a bit confident. I'd won my piece, and I am not a grandmaster by any means, but I like to think that once I'm a piece up, I stand a pretty good chance of winning a game. And then Ollie came out and reminded me that it is chess boxing, and I've got to be able to hold my own in both. And those first few bits of that round, the first maybe 30 seconds, it felt a lot longer. I'm not sure exactly how long it was. That was the toughest bit. Yeah. He was absolutely gunning for me, and I couldn't get anything out of me. It was on all sides of me, blows coming down really heavy, and it was all I could do to hold my guard together. And for Moen, that was the moment that I was most worried that something could go horribly wrong for me. But I held on, and he got that little bit tired. After you throw a few punches, it's surprising how quickly it tires you. And then I managed to get in a few of my own and get back some control of the bout. But those seconds were where he was at his best. It was very, very good performance at that moment. I was
Yeah.
very worried.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Ollie. I think his performance is exceptional. I was saying in the previous episode that I completely forgot that neither of you had fought before. I mean, honestly, like I thought the way you approach the chess, the technical elements of the boxing, your fitness, I was really impressed with both of you. And I think it's a difficult part to play. If you happen to go a piece down, if you're a chess boxer, that doesn't mean you give up. If anything, it means you redouble your efforts and you think about other ways of getting that piece back, unsettling your opponent, and giving you want to know that you've left everything out in the ring, which I think you could definitely say about Ollie.
Oh yeah, I was really impressed by Ollie. Actually, I knew, like you said, we were going to be a good fight because we were so close in skill and so close in chess as well. It was always going to be a really good matchup. He, from a performing point of view, he really put the effort in. No one can claim they were disappointed by that. Everyone got their money's worth out of that fight. He was really, really good. He never gave up. He put in effort every single time. And okay, I was a piece up for a while, but he was fighting all the way to the end, and he got that piece back. I was very absolute props to Ollie. He was a great opponent, and I was really impressed by him.
So talk us through that, how you sort of lost your bishop coming into the end.
So yeah, that was a little careless. That was a little careless for me. I managed to defuse most of the situation. I'd got my queenside pawn, and I'd got a nice solid position. And he had this pawn on f3, and he lined up the rook and the bishop. And I just missed that he could threaten a check. It was really simple. He just moved the pawn to make the discovered and won the bishop that way. It was really, really careless of me, but that's what happens. That's precisely why you put in all the effort in, because after you've been punched in the head as many times as I had, you're going to overlook simple things like that. And Ollie was just constantly making the opportunities for me to go wrong. He never gave up. He was always putting the challenge out there. And eventually it paid off him, as it does. It's exactly the advice you give people when they're trading. If you give your opponent the opportunity to make mistakes, then they can. And I did. It was careless, but he gave me the opportunity to be careless. So, credit to him.
From a neutral's point of view, obviously it made for a much more exciting endgame because it really brought jeopardy back into it. And like you said, it might be even with after losing that bishop, it might be a simple endgame if you're completely sober and you're not punch drunk in any way. But obviously that's not the case. So those kind of scenarios, it was much more on a knife edge than it perhaps would have been. And then eventually, obviously, you did finish the game and you got your checkmate. Or I think perhaps he resigned just before you got your checkmate.
It was checkmate. He gave absolutely nothing. He was not letting me off with something as simple as imagination. If I wanted to win, I had to prove it.
Well, we had another bout where where Delhi thought he'd got a checkmate and he was celebrating, and turns out he didn't actually have a checkmate.
Yes, that was slightly premature. But he did go on to win, though, didn't he? Which makes up for it.
He did go on to win. He did get to win.
But still, I remember watching that from the changing room. We had the little screen in the changing room while we were getting ready. I remember him standing up and going, "Is that right?" and then having to sit back down. But yeah, Delhi's a character though. He's fun to watch.
Incredible. Like, what a showman. It's amazing.
Oh yeah.
We're running out of time, but do you want to talk a little bit about the rest of the show? Because obviously you perhaps didn't see all of it, but were there any highlights for you outside of your bout?
I think the highlight has to be Matt the Minotaur versus the Northern Powerhouse. Yeah. That was the fight we were all looking forward to, and the gossip that was going around was that Matt was a dead man. I mean, David is just so imposing. He's such a good chess player. I can't imagine anyone willingly go up against him. I don't know what you had to pay Matt to get him in that ring, but I'm sure it was decent. No one was doubting that Matt was a good fighter, but it seemed a foregone conclusion. And then those first few rounds, it looked as if Matt was gonna drop a little bit, but no, he held on and he brought back the biggest underdog that I could imagine. An amazing fight. I was so impressed by that. Watching that afterwards, that was a real highlight. I really enjoyed that. It's maybe the best chess boxing I've ever seen. Great fight, and credit to them both. No dispute on David. He was a great fight and he gave it all, but everyone roots for the underdog. I feel bad for him.
Yeah, and I think it swung from one to the other in both disciplines, which you don't often get. That's quite unusual. But yeah, I think I thought it was incredible. I should also say, David had a difficult preparation. I know he pulled a few things in his shoulder and bits and pieces, but I'm sure he wouldn't ever consider using that as an excuse. And he certainly wasn't going to be, pulling out the fight. So kudos to him.
No.
Great
kudos to David. He gave a great fight. It was a really interesting chess game. It was decided in a few key moments, that fight. Either of them could have won it at any point.
I thought it was also a very interesting showcase for what, obviously it was a title fight and there was a belt, a British heavyweight. The longer form chess boxing, it can make that difference. You can get a much bigger arc in terms of how the bout develops, and I think that really played out in that one, which was fantastic to see. So we're coming towards the end. I usually ask people what their favorite chocolate bar is.
Almost certainly a Bounty. I do like a bit of coconut with my chocolate bar.
Taste of Paradise, nice one. I'm very partial to Bounty myself. And is there anyone you'd like to have a shout out to? Anyone in your team, your trainers?
Definitely need to thank Jake. He was such a good coach. He gave me some really good advice, and he was supporting me the whole way through, giving me advice right up at the ring. Huge shout out to him. Thank you so much, Jake. He did at one point describe me as looking like Geoffrey Dama squeezing a fish in the corner of the ring. That was a bit strange, but aside from that, really, really great support. Yeah. But I got that moment beforehand where everything had gone completely calm.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Because you had a very calm outlook. Yeah. So in a way, it was a compliment.
There was nothing more I could do. It was just going to go in, and he was saying, "Are you nervous?" I'm like, "Well, I don't think I am anymore." It's like, "You look like Geoffrey Dama squeezing a fish." Okay. So yeah, shout out to him. Shout out to Taylor for her support as well. She has told me that it was very impressive, and she really enjoyed it. But this is not positive reinforcement, and I can never do it again, which is fair enough. But and then everyone at Chessboxing who've made such Chessboxing Nation who've made such great classes and given me this opportunity to fight, which I didn't think I was going to get for a very long time, but it was great and a really exciting experience. So thank you and thank everybody else.
Well, thank you very much for fighting, for coming on the podcast. There wouldn't be anything really without people prepared to fight. And I think you both acquitted yourselves incredibly well. You trained extremely hard, and it's the whole bout was to your credit, both of you. And I should also just say we haven't actually got any dates for our next event just yet, but we do have a date for our Christmas drinks, which is the 2nd of December. We're all meeting up at the Shaftesbury Tavern in Islington, which is right next to Islington Boxing Club, at 2:00. So if you're around and you'd like to have a drink, meet your favourite chess boxer, come along to the Shaftesbury Tavern on the 2nd of December. As you can see, and as I mentioned earlier, we've got a line of merchandise which we're launching for Christmas. So what do you want for Christmas? If you want some chess boxer merchandise for Christmas, make sure you put it on your list so that Santa can bring you some. We're promoting the line with a 20% discount. If you use the code London Chessbox, you get 20% off. That's a hell of a lot off. And if you spend over £50, you get a free cap as well. So make sure you do that. Go to chessboxingnation.com. And thanks again, Jack, for being on the podcast. I'll leave you to your evening, and I'll look forward to seeing you again in training at some point.
I look forward to it as soon as I get a chance.
Cheers, Jack.
See you guys.
Thank you very much.